Hi everyone, delonewolf here, and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And as always, we'll start with a little bit of news and stuff that happens in the game before we get started on the market segment itself. And of course, last week was still dominated by the war for me personally, because it didn't end after losing all my structures. Now, someone from the opponents actually sent me a mail saying that they were suspecting a sort of a bug because there was a kill mail that never materialized for one of the structures, and they felt like perhaps the war was stuck because of that. So they told me that they would accept a 1-ISK surrender, and I kind of wanted to move on as well, so I did that 1-ISK surrender, which was accepted, and so now the war has ended. Now I still think that was perhaps not the situation, because if I remember correctly from the dev block where the war changes were announced, if you're part of an alliance, you automatically become eligible for war at all times, even if you don't have structures. And I think that that's what was happening. But I thought it was pretty damn interesting. I got a very cordial mail. So even my opponent was looking at this war and was saying, why the hell isn't this ending? Then they're sending me a message, we'll accept like a 1-ISK surrender, just so everyone can move on. And I think that this shows that this was a business transaction or a bump in the road for them on on a much bigger plan than just taking care of this one YouTuber that has a free port. And this was also now confirmed more and more in comments that I'm seeing on a lot of videos. People explaining that this is now happening pretty much all over New Eden, because the nullsec alliances are now trying to exert their influence over highsec and probably lowsec as well, because they do want that independence, they do want to be able to make their own stuff. It's a big part of the drive, I think, for going into nullsec. And so now this is basically a very big change in the political landscape of EVE Online, where free ports are much harder to materialize, especially if you're getting close to lowsec and nullsec, and I think also close to trade hubs. That is going to be something that these big nullsec groups will be looking at. And so yeah, they've got their tentacles into all of New Eden. Pretty damn interesting in my book, and so this is why for now I'm going to scope it all out and have a little bit more of a nomadic lifestyle. I think it's going to be pretty damn interesting. And as CCP has been coming out with a lot of updates as well, I still have to catch up to a lot of those actually dev blocks on changes that they're planning to do for the game. So maybe I'll try to find a little bit of time to do that next week as well. But yeah, I couldn't even exactly tell you what the next plans in the roadmap are. So let's move on to the New Eden store quickly and see if there's anything special here, specifically in the services. No, everything seems to be right where it is. No sales or anything like that to spot, so we can just move on to the market, and we'll start as always with plex and stuff coming in at 320. Like that. Alright, and the music changes just in time. Here is a plex. You can see that we have that slight move up here towards 2.75 million on average on the chart. 5-day moving average starting to pull up a little bit as well. And if we look at JITA 44, 2.8 million for the sellers, 2.7 million for the buyers. They have been forced up above that, and of course we should be going, oh no, that's a surprise. I thought we would be going below that in the perimeter trade tower. But nope, they're well above 2.8 million all of a sudden, and a more aggressive buyers there. No, that's just above 2.7 million as well. So very interesting, a little bit of upwards pressure in the oh, and I should really keep that off for this segment. Really a little bit of upwards pressure seen in the plex market, something that yeah, we haven't seen in a while here. Basically over a month of hesitation from the start of October all the way to the second half of November, and that after a very, very weak summer, you could say, looking at this chart going down to less than 2.5 million at some points. So here we go. Let's see if this is the start of the run-up towards the summer. Perhaps right now there's more people that are thinking, well, holidays are coming, perhaps I should treat myself to some stuff in EVE Online. And then of course some plex could be very handy there, but that wouldn't well, it could explain more demand, perhaps a little bit more willingness to spend ISK, turn it into plex, and grab some stuff. Let's take a look at the multiple pilot training certificate. Still in the hesitating phase. If I look at this one, volumes are of course a lot lower than for the plex, and so it's a little bit hard to say exactly what's happening here. Just below 1.4 billion for the sellers, just below 1.3 billion for the buyers. Basically still the same thing. We've been here, actually if you look at it here, since that bump up from September, we haven't moved at all. A little bit of up and downward swings, but really we're basically still hesitating now for 2.5 months in the trading certificates. These skill extractors next are starting to show that upwards pressure as well, right? The 5-day moving average moving above the 20-day moving average, and a slight uptick in daily averages as well. Let's take a look at the prices. 316 million for the sellers, 310 million for the buyers. That's a super narrow margin still, and big difference here. Still the lowest prices in the Tranquility Trading Tower, where, with JITA sell prices going up to 325 million ISK. So that is slightly different move than for Plex itself. Now it is true that Plex is slightly unique. I think that you can also trade Plex through the app. And so that is why JITA is able to so easily dominate that price range from JITA for Plex, and not for skill extractors and some of the other goods. After that, we have a look at the skill injectors. So here are the large skill injectors after dipping to a 1-year low point, which came to me as a little bit of a surprise because Plex was hesitating for so long and I was expecting that upwards pressure to start. Despite that, we still had this big dip. Probably all of the special events that CCP is doing at the end of the year here, which provides a lot of skill points. That's my read on the situation. There's also people that are saying, well, because of all of the changes to the game, why would you now spend a lot of ISK on large skill injectors to create a Rorcal pilot or a carrier pilot or even a super pilot? All of that is now in much lower demand than, let's say, a year ago, when the Rorcal was still king, but CCP had only just announced the resource changes. So here this is basically also perhaps a response from the player base when it comes to like choosing a big specialization, an end game ship for their character, which was often done through large scale injectors and on a large scale as well for alliances, so that they could basically get the most out of their members as quickly as possible. And that part of the playstyle may be gone a little bit, which for me honestly is not necessarily a bad thing. I've always felt that skill injectors were a bit of a danger for the longevity of the game, and all of these resource changes and also the political changes, I think, do mean that I think players will be taking their time a little bit, deciding on what they want to do and giving their characters more of a natural skill up cycle, rather than, alright, this is the best thing for in the game for mining, so that's the pilot I need. Here are all the skill injectors I need. There's the perfect pilot. I think those days may be over in response to all of the changes that CCP is doing at the moment, not just a resource crunch. So that perhaps is a part of this 1-year downwards pressure for large skill injectors. Now a little bit of a bump. After that, of course, when we reach a 1-year low point, the market does try to snag the cheapest stuff. Small scale injectors, very same pattern, so they're back in sync. Quick look at the prices: 134.5 million for the sellers, 125 for the buyers, so still a little bit of margin between sellers and buyers. I think we still have to do that for the largest as well. 664 million for the sellers, 643 million for the buyers, and again the best trade prices dominating by the Tranquility Trading Tower. After that, we have the daily alpha injectors that have a completely different feel to them, right? Multiple part, the large scale injectors, small ones, 1-year low point. Daily alpha injector, 1-year high point, staying above 45 million very impressively. 47 million for the sellers, 44 million for the buyers. A lot of demand for alpha clones, and I think that does mean that this pretty much hits a sort of a sweet spot. Being able to make 50 million ISK for an alpha clone is something that is manageable, overseeable. You can do that with exploration, you can do that even through mining or through mission running as an alpha clone. It's a very nice goal to shoot for, and then you can give that alpha character that nice little bump towards its full potential as an alpha character, which is not that difficult to reach if I'm not mistaken. And so these daily alpha injectors seem to be very popular, and that's also showing that yeah, the alpha clones are definitely you know, becoming a staple of the EVE Online landscape. A lot of players choose to play this way in EVE Online. And then after that, we still have the hypercores to look at that are, well, up slightly, heading back to that 300,000 ISK range. It's 295 in Jita, almost 290,000 for the sellers in the player-owned trade hubs, and it's 280,000 ISK practically for the buyers. If you read this as a barometer for activity in the game, might actually show slightly upwards pressure there, so a little bit more activity in EVE Online, although that is not necessarily the right correlation. May just be that a little bit of fire selling from your assets could be done, could also do some increased hypernet relay activity for some of the like really expensive items, for instance. So overall though, I do think that this may be indicating slightly increased activity, at least if you look at the summer and then what's happening now. We do see that uptick in activity after the summer slump, so to me it may still be correct. Next up, we have the minerals coming in at 1120. And here, of course, we are going to have to look at what's happening with titanium. You may already have spotted that from the ticker, continuing the decline right through 7 ISK on the daily averages at the moment. So that is, to me, very, very interesting. Look at that. In Jita, we are down to 6.72 ISK for the sellers, 6.39 for the buyers, right through the 7 ISK barrier. Basically, no defense of that by anyone on the market. And to me, yeah, this is basically also part of the confirmation that what's happening here is the supplies are picking up, because those Gnostic alliances are not going to allow themselves to become dependent on the mining activities of others. No, instead they'll organize their own groups, they'll all organize their own dominance of certain high-sec regions, perhaps sometimes systems, perhaps more at other points, and then they will just have players that will basically be mining for them. But the result of that is probably that everyone else is creating oversupply at this point. There is just this bump in high-sec mining that happens in general. We've got a lot more mining coming in. Or perhaps Nullsec is doing more of their own mining now that these groups are perhaps starting to be organized, and so everyone else is forced to sell to the market. There's more of it, and so the prices are going down. We just shot straight through that 7 ISK, and it's quite a lot. Look at that. Batches of 100 to 200 million are pretty much regularly coming in here for titanium. Maybe some late dumping happening for some stocks, but honestly, then we would probably have seen a more jumpy road down than this one right here. So I basically think that, yeah, activity has increased. We also saw that from the economic numbers, by the way. A video on that should be coming out next week, but I definitely noticed that in the Reddit thread about the October numbers, that now high-sec is completely dominating the mining numbers, and so of course titanium supplies are dominating as a result of that, and that price is going down quite substantially. It's still definitely a reasonable price historically speaking. It is not bad to be mining for titanium, but there's probably gonna be far better options in riskier parts of space, of course. Pyrite is able to plateau at 17.5 ISK here, 17.3 for the seller, 17.16 for the first buyer. Basically cementing the reverse back to a natural state where titanium is less expensive than pyrite, just judging from the sheer volumes that you get for a cubic meter of ore that you mine, generally speaking. So I would say that that is good news, of course, because this brings us back to, all right, you don't only have to focus on titanium, you can also basically try to get a little bit of pyrite, and it'll actually be worth it to hunt for that as well. On a 1 1-year chart from 5 ISK to 17.5 ISK, over triple the price, is definitely a very nice performance. And then if you look at this entire chart, looking at what it did in just the last 2 months or so, it really, to me, again feels that here the reserves were depleted by other groups, and now they need fresh supplies for the market for what they're producing at the moment. After that, we have the Mexelon chart that is continuing to command that pretty nice margin. Normal price, I would say 70 ISK is actually a good price for Mexelon. So the fact that we're able to sell these for 130 ISK, buyers coming in at 110, is definitely pretty damn impressive, especially if we look at the titanium chart that is going down like this. So Mexelon is then now, I think, what you want to focus on for high-sec mining. It is absolutely possible to grab Mexelon from there, and that still has that really big premium compared to the normal historical prices. And then what I'm really curious about is Isogen going up? And that is still a no, still staying below 50 ISK here at the moment. 49 ISK for the sellers, 45 ISK for the buyers, and we still have 100 million units here, we still have 22 million units here, and another 300 here. Perhaps that's still the one that is basically blocking what's happening with Isogen, but I'm again going to give that perspective. Historically speaking, Isogen has been more expensive than Mexelon, because per cubic meter that you mine, you'll always get less Isogen than Mexelon. It's just normally a rarer mineral, but it had been overproduced so much during the plentiful phase of mining, Rorcal mining and things like that, that it lost all of its value practically. It went down to like 10 ISK or something like that. So the fact that it already went up to 50 is not so bad. But then if we again look at the volumes of Mexelon, 16 million, 20 million, that's definitely the high range. A lot of sellers in just a couple 100,000 units. And then you compare that with Isogen, which, as I said, should have lower volumes, 100 million, 30 million, 26 million, another 300 million units, another 48 million units, another 30 here. This is just not another 192 at 58. So this is just not what you would expect, of course, if you keep the volume potential of all of these minerals. So I personally still think that this is one that will eventually really start to go back up, because you pretty much have to go to low sec in order to grab Isogen, but that it is still suffering or having some inertia because of the old stocks that had been accumulated for so long. After that, we have Noxium. Excuse me. After that, we got Noxium able to really nicely defend its current price range of well above 1000 ISK, which I think is expensive historically speaking, but not completely outlandish. 1150 pretty much for the sellers, and 1030 ISK for the buyers. A little bit of margin opening up here. A couple million units here as the largest volume, so this is pretty much normal. And this again, just like with pyrite, right, where eventually the stocks are depleted and then you have this move up. In Noxium, the same thing happened, although we already started to feel that a little bit earlier here at the start of the summer. You get this upward pressure, but then CCP announces the next round where, alright, Noxium, nope, no longer from high sec, that's just not going to be possible anymore. And then we have this nice big jump up to 1100 ISK, and we're able to maintain that price. So I personally, despite the fact that you can still see that jump here in Isogen, think that another jump up or this phase for Noxium, this upwards pressure phase here for a couple of months, is still in the books for Isogen. We just need to get through, well, 100 million here, 300 million here, another 100 million down here, another 200 million down here. We still just have a lot of old Isogen that will need to go through all of the industry in EVE Online. That's gonna take a while. We have to admit that that is going to take a decent amount of time for that to materialize. But I think eventually it will happen. So if there's one thing that I would not sell at the moment, it would be Isogen. Everything else feels like, yeah, take advantage of these prices, because you never know when big groups organize around these better prices, and something like what happens with titanium could happen to them. After that, we have Zydrine staying above the 1250 range, 1300 for the sellers, 1220 for the buyers. Again, way back, probably to my early times of doing EVE Talk, this feels like the normal range for Zydrine as well. And then we've got Megasites, that is also an oddball out for some reason, went up to 800 ISK again, and then is going back down slightly. Megasite used to be more expensive than Zydrine. 690 for the sellers and 656 for the buyers. So for the Tech 1 minerals here, it's still that same situation, especially for Isogen. I think it's inertia because of old stocks. Megasite, perhaps the same story. I'm not exactly sure there. Perhaps like the invasion content and things like that, there are extra sources of Megasite that are keeping things in check here as well, potentially. But overall, we definitely have that increased price for a lot of these minerals back to, what I would call very old normal prices for these minerals. And then the first one that's pulling back is Tritanium. Again, I think dominance from Nosec alliances that is starting to show up in HiSec as well, because they want their own flow of minerals rather than having to go to the market for them. And then finally, we have Morphite, of course, tied to Tech 2 production, climbing again, going above 30,000 ISK, triple the price of the start of the year. Very impressive, of course, 32,000 for the sellers, 29,000 for the buyers. I think it will be a while before my buy point for Morphite, which is below 10,000 ISK, will show up again. Alright, let's move on to the PI market, coming in at 2055. And I'm afraid that this will probably be the same story as before. At least Broadcast Notes is already confirming this. We are continuing to go back down. It's just almost impossible for PI at the moment to go back towards historical averages. And the main reason is, of course, in my opinion, or a big reason is, of course, in my opinion, that minerals is now sucking up so much ISK from the wallets, from players, from traders, for alliances, whoever, that there's just nothing left for PI, which is very passive to make anyways. That supply just keeps coming and coming and coming, and as a result these prices are going down substantially. Less than 1.4 million for the sellers of Broadcast Notes, very close to these buyers, and it's just, these are all the sellers, and as I've said, nobody wants to spend this in PI at the moment, so this is going down to another 1-year low point this week. Construction blocks kind of confirming that, a little bit of an upward swing here in the price, but look at the new range, right? It is well away from 10,000, 11,000, which I would say is an historical average. We're below 9,000 for the sellers, just above 7,000 ISK for the buyers. That's even a very large spread between sellers and buyers, despite these super low prices. Consumer electronics continuing its decline to a 1-year low point, selling for less than 7,000 ISK, buyers coming in at 6,500. Then we've got coolants continuing to hover in its much lower range, 7.5 to 8.5, probably 8.7 to 7,000. Look at that lack of demand. Yeah, who wants to buy coolants at the moment? Basically no one. So that is definitely the general trend here. That's still that one exception category, right? Cryoprotectant solutions. We've got this March-April bump, so tied to the production of implants, and that one just does not want to break the 100,000 ISK barrier on the sellers. 106, buyers at 96,000, so you could grab some. But these basically still have that historical range that they're working on, and the market seems very hesitant to say, all right, we're gonna actually dive down to much lower prices here. Perhaps there is better consumption when it comes to implants, and as a result, this is where the money is at the moment. So I've always put my money on producing PI related to fuels, because my thinking was fuel consumption that should have pretty steady demand. But of course, everything that's been happening now with the change to the structures, with what's happening with nullsec, it's a lot less fuel that's needed, so those prices are going down, down and down. And then if there's one thing that's still being consumed, of course, it's implants through podding, and so this is now perhaps the one shining beacon in PI. Anything tied to production of implants still holding on to an average price range. Enriched uranium again between 9 and 10,000 ISK. 9.9 even for the sellers, 9,300 ISK for the buyers. much lower range than before. This is actually not easy to produce, so normal price 12,500 and better is definitely the old average, so you can see that we lost percentage wise probably around the same thing. Integrity response drones continuing to hover well below 2 million at those low price ranges. Mechanical parts dropping off yet again, going down another phase. 8,300 for the sellers, 7,800 for the buyers. Then we get nanites, that is tied to the production of implants, and so we're staying above 5,000 disc for this one. 5,400 for the sellers, 5,300 for the buyers. Looking at this 1 year chart, it's still okay, definitely reasonable. Nano factories though, ouch. Through the 750,000 ISK barrier, normal price at least 1 million, 720,000 for the sellers, 640 for the buyers. Again, these are the buyers, and then way more sellers. Organic mortar applicators trying to get back to that 1 year low point as well, now going below 800,000. Yeah, 750 for the first sellers, 690 for the buyers, below 700,000 disc. That's well below the entire chart. Recursive computing module, I mean, it's just confirming the trend, right? I think we can go a little bit more quickly. Robotics had a little bit of a bump here, someone trying to buy when we went below 70,000 disc, and I think they'll find that they'll need a lot of patience for this one, because back to 69,000 for the sellers, 63,000 for the buyers. And I doubt that it's whoever bought this bump here, that it's that robotics that is finding its way to the market already, because that would be at a loss. Now, I will say on this that going over this segment right now, if there's one thing that I would then dare to hope for on the longer term, it would of course be PI tied to fuels. Because there is perhaps ways and things that CCP will introduce into the game that will require more fuel consumption, and so they could be an interesting investment for that longer term. But short term, of course, almost all of them are suffering quite heavily. Self-harmonizing power cores staying below 1.5 million, normal price 2 million. Sterile conduits also back on that low point range. Where are those buyers? 800,000 ISK. Where did we start the year at? 1.3 million. Yep, that's not so good. Yukomi superconductors, another one for the implants, able to stay above 50,000 ISK. Yeah, by quite a bit. And then finally, the wetware mainframes. I was trying to hold on as well here through September, but yeah, to no avail, back to the 1.5 million range. In fact, 1.25 million for the buyers and below 1.5 million for the sellers, getting very close to that 1 year low point yet again. This is a segment that needs CCP intervention, I think, to really turn around. But I should also again mention this. To me, it makes a lot of sense, right? CCP wanted loss to be more meaningful. They want the efforts of players to be rewarded rather than automatic systems. And PI is the exact opposite. PI is a very passive part of the EVE Online economy. And as a result, perhaps CCP is very happy with the fact that this is going down in value, so that there is less motivation to, create a lot of alts to just do PI and then to say, there we go, I'm settled, I can pay for all my accounts through all of the PI that I'm doing. No, they want players to be active, to be flying, to be in space, so that there is potential for conflict out there. With PI, there's very little potential for conflict, generally speaking. So as a result, perhaps CCP is seeing this as a good thing, the loss of value for PI materials that's happening at the moment. After that, we have advanced moon materials coming in at 2810. Let's go. Crystalline carbonite for Galente production, Tick 2 production. Alright, definitely diving down to a less than average price. 139 for the sellers, 131 for the buyers. Look at that last 24 hours, quite a bit of supply coming in. So this is definitely a trend break from early fall here, when we had record prices for a couple of weeks. After that, we have our it's carbide that I'm looking for. So titanium carbide for Caldari production, also going well below average now, on more pressure. 150 for the sellers, 142 for the buyers. Yep, that is definitely well below average as well. After that, we have our Fernite carbide for Amar production. That one was suffering for like most of this time, except for these two bumps, but they were tied to the war that was happening. The Imperium was using quite a few Amar Tech 2 ships as part of their meta, and as a result we had this rush on here by players that was always closed very, very quickly and even oversupplied by the markets on both occasions. So this could be part of like manipulation as well, right? A scheme. Perhaps the Imperium was saying, we've got a lot of this stuff. If we could bump up the prices and then try to dump as much of it as possible to make ISK, that would make sense. And so this could definitely be what happened here. So if we disregard these two bumps, we have been oversupplied the whole time for Ferrite Carbide, and now we're heading for a 1 year low point. 122 for the first seller, 125 for most, 107 for the buyers is definitely on the cheap side. And then we have our Tungsten Carbide for Amar, that's also going for a 1 year low point. So it's not been like that for quite a few weeks. In fact, since the fall of Nyarja, I feel like we've seen differences between the different production cycles for the different empires, and now we're seeing uniformly the pressure mount and prices going below average at least. Let's take a look at the impact on the metamaterials then. Here is the photonic metamaterials for Galente, also close to a 1 year low point and basically flat above 10,000 ISK. And then I think the big anomaly was Caldari, non-linear metamaterials. Yeah, that's going for twice the price and is actually able to stay above 20,000 ISK for the sellers, 19,200 for the buyers. That is still a very big difference. But if you wanted to take a gamble on this, then of course you have to think, do you think that Galente is the problem and that one will have to recover, or do you think that the high price for Caldari production, that's the anomaly and that one will inevitably go down? That's the real gamble, of course. Next up we have plasmonic metamaterials for Minmatar. That's right in between them, right at around 15k. Yeah, 15,000 to the sellers, 14,000 for the buyers. And then for Amar we have terahertz metamaterials that are also at a 1 year low point, but at that same range as the Amar one, around 15,000 ISK. So this is really the question that I think if you want to do some trading in this one that you should ask yourself. Do you think that the range for Amar and Minmatar is already the correct one? Then you can expect Galente to go up, of course, and Caldari to go back down. Or do you see reasons for this big difference? I personally have a hard time finding that. Because generally speaking, right, too expensive, you know, if like one ship meta does become dominant, like Caldari at the moment for instance, then what you will usually see is that there are meta shifts because of price as well. And so that should mean that all of them have at least somewhat similar range. So this one feels very, very different and strange. And then considering what's happening with all the carbides, that they are moving in unison to low points and well below average, I kinda am worried for non-linear metamaterials. I don't think they'll be able to defend this this premium for very long. Next to all of that Tech 2 production stuff, we have other stuff as well, and here we have the same story as with PI, I'm afraid. Here is fermionic condensates very clearly moving to a lower range at a 1 year low point. Ferrogel moved to a lower range at a 1 year low point below 30,000 ISK, started the year at 40k. Fullerites also going for another lower range at a 1 year low point. Yeah, this is getting decently repetitive, but it's the situation that we find ourselves in. Hypersynaptic fibers doing somewhat okay, but definitely trading at the lower end of the range. Nano transistors, you can very clearly see that again here, right? 5 to 6,000, that was the range. We actually even had a spike here, 5 to 6,000, and then now, nope, we're moving to 5, we're moving to 4, and now we're moving in this new lower range. Phenolic composites, again 1 year low point. Ceramic fibers, again 1 year low point. This is the price of those expensive minerals. I'm not sure what the situation at the moment is, but this is something that I definitely always remember. A number of what was it called? FanFest. There we go. Man, it's been so long since we've had a FanFest that I forgot the name for a second there. So a number of FanFests ago, CCP actually gave us those metrics, and at the time there was 3 to 4 times more stuff in EVE Online than there was ISK. So basically, if you had to have all, if you wanted to turn everything that was available in the game into liquid ISK, you needed 3 to 4 more times ISK than there was actually available in the game. And so this is of course part of why I think that at the moment Minerals is consuming so much of the ISK in New Eden that it is inevitably having downwards pressure, you could say deflationary pressure on other assets. Let's take a look at the Tech 2 ship market next, coming in at 34.30. There we go, and yeah, these are there's more Tech 2 ships than this, but for me this has always been an interesting category for active trading. Logistics cruisers, stealth bombers, some hacks, some heavy assault cruisers have always been very volatile, and you could make some really nice trades. Here for instance is the Basilisk. You can see peaks up to 240 million, low points down to 190. That means that you can probably buy around the 180 range. That is definitely some nice trade potential. At the moment we are going down from a high point, so it's a little bit too early. Buyers are already down to 195 million though, 234 for the for the sellers. That's pretty decently large gap between these two. What's unfortunate, you can see the new supply, it's next to nothing, so there's definitely no major pressure happening on the price at the moment. After that we've got the Cerberus that is going down from, well, a less pronounced high point of 250, right? Normally 280 to 300 million, low points well below 200 million. You can see here this is very tradable. In fact, if you look back about a year ago, you can see that I have done some very nice Cerberus trades riding these two waves, but now at the moment it's a little bit more muted, I think, because of course again that same situation with Minerals, but we went up to 250 and a low point at 200. That's still tradable, and at the moment we're again going down in between, 220 for the sellers, 206 for the buyers. But if you look at the last 3 days here, that's a lot more supply, so there is definitely some momentum for this downwards pressure here. It's going to be interesting to see how low these buyers can eventually end up. The Guardian, same early start right here, pretty good, not great in volatility, but every 3 months or so we generally had an opportunity to both buy and sell, but now here definitely moving to a lower range, less high spike here up to 230, and again we're hesitating in between, although buyers are probably pretty low. Yeah, 190 for the sellers, 176 for the buyers. I would honestly say if you can grab a Guardian below 180 million ISK, you've got a pretty decent purchase. After that we've got the Hound, my textbook for that volatility. Look at that, going well below 25 million and then well above 30. Once, twice, 3, 4, 5, almost 5 times here. So this is pretty damn good for someone that likes to buy these Hounds close to 20 million. I think 22 million and things like that have definitely been possible here, and sell them well above 30. That makes for a lot of risk, and sometimes you could have that turnover in a matter of maybe a week or something like that. So pretty damn cool. At the moment we are back at a 1-year low point, so that part is interesting. 22 million for the sellers, 21 million almost for the first buyers. Look, it's still aggressive, right? Despite the fact that there's not a lot of demand, buyers are still pretty aggressive, so traders are probably looking at that exact same chart and saying, well, if 30 to 35 million is my potential, well, it's gonna be very hard to grab some below 20 million ISK, so we're already moving in at this point. But of course the last couple of months have been a little bit dry when it comes to the volatility. Let's keep that in mind as well. But Hound is very low at the moment. Ichthyrsa, a little bit different than the segments that I like to look at for trading, but I also want to keep an eye on the Triglavian Collective, of course. They've pulled out of HiSec, you could say, and are now PogVen related. I'm also kind of curious to see where CCP wants to take both the Triglavians and Edencom. So at the moment we're seeing a little bit of pressure on the price, but also coming from almost a doubling of the price to 700 million ISK. 677 for the sellers, 625 for the buyers. I would not be surprised. You can also see that very recent, there's not a lot here, that players that have bought Ichthyrsa's before and maybe had like a reserve one just in case and use it for many reasons, or now like saying, all right, I actually have to sell it, it's such a better price than when I bought it like 6 months ago, I gotta take that profit. And so that this is slowly populating these sell orders, and that's why this pressure is building. Of that, we've got the Ishtar that was already pretty low last year and is now moving to a pronounced 1 year low point. 186 million for the sellers, 174 million for the buyers. Regular average 230 million. So just like with the Hound, the good news is we're at a 1 year low point. The bad news is the Ishtar has never been that volatile. I think it is because it is this all-purpose ship. It's useful in PvP, it's useful in PvE. It's almost, I think, gonna be one of the more useful moving cruisers as well. I know that the Vexor is one that can do a lot of combat and transport missions up to tier 2, I think, at the same time, without needing anything special in the fits. So this is really like an all-purpose ship that as a result has that much more steady demand and doesn't have that volatility. But right now, of course, very pronounced 1 year low point for your consideration. The fact that I already have a lot of Ishtars, so I could take advantage of a trade at any time basically. But yeah, this is the lowest we've been all year by quite a bit. Next up here we've got the Manticore. That one is not at a 1 year low point, but also not as consistent, I'm gonna say, in the volatility as the Hound, for instance. But when it happens, right here, right, you had a low, you could probably have bought them below 25 million, but you could also have sold them almost at 40 million ISK. And why are the daily averages not showing? There we go, at almost 40 million ISK. When it happens for the Manticore, it's huge, but it's a lot less consistent. And at the moment, yeah, we're definitely below average, but not at the 1 year low point yet. 27 for the sellers, 25 for the buyers. I'd say Ishtar Hound looks a little bit better. Next up here we get the Munin diving back down to its 1 year low point range, I would say. 190 for the sellers, 170 and below for the buyers. You could buy one, I think, if you haven't already. Nemesis staying above 25 million ISK. That one was not so bad. High points at 30, low points, I think you'd always buy these below 80 million, below 20 million ISK at the low point. So there's definitely some volatility that you can take advantage of here, like this fee over here, 30 down to 20, probably buyable at 19, 18, then back up to 27.5. That's pretty damn nice. At the moment, we're still above 25 million, 26 for the sellers, 22.5 for the buyers. That's again too early. So Onero's next, continuing that slow decline. So I was kind of hoping that the logistics cruisers would do a little bit more, right? The Basilisk is not so bad, but yeah, the Oneros just doesn't have the volumes and is continuing to be super cheap. Basically at the moment, 164 for the sellers, 148 for the buyers. And then I added a couple of battleships just to get a feel of, does Take 2 prices show up in just production costs? I think in something that is a little bit more inertia, like Black Ops battleships, that's where it's going to show. And I would say here, this is a spike from the redesign from CCP. For these Black Ops battleships went up to 1.3 billion, but look at that, before the summer, through the summer, well above 1.1 billion for the average price. And now, yeah, Take 2 prices, Take 2 advanced moon mats, definitely under pressure. And so here the production costs go down, and so the average price dives below a billion ISK. 1 billion for the sellers, 920 million for the buyers. After that, we've got the Purifier, also lovely in volatility. Absolutely love the Purifier for trades. At the moment, trading at a pretty low range, well below 25 million. 27 though for the sellers and 22 million for the buyers. For your consideration, you could definitely try to grab a cheap Purifier. Scimitar is also, it's got some volatility, but a little bit too low in volumes to really be consistent. At the moment, it's also above 200 million on average, 210 pretty much for the sellers, 183 for the buyers. Not one that I would make a move on. And then we get the Widow also for that battleship to try and keep an eye on what the price cost is. And again here, April through the summer, well above 1.1 billion. At the moment, it's not a billion yet, but the pressure is mounting here as well. So just above a billion, or just below 1.1 billion for the sellers and 960 million for the buyers. So they want to drag that price closer and closer to that billion range. And finally, we get the Zealot that's back at a 1-year low point, has some nice volatility, but is not doing that well in the last couple of months. So I think that unfortunately the situation in the advanced movements is putting a dampener on the nice bouncy behavior that we often see in Take-Two ships. Now, we've been here before, honestly. I've been doing this for a decently long time at this point, and we've had drought periods where Take-Two is basically slowing down and you don't get those like couple weeks, all right, could do and buy and a sell in this one, and that seems to be the case at the moment because of well, what's happening in other places in the game. That doesn't mean there are not opportunities. I'd say the Hound is very pronounced at the 1-year low point, the Ishtar as well, but it also means that you'll probably need a lot more patience for that trade to actually materialize. After that, we have the Tech-3 ships coming in at 44.50. There we go, and as always we start with the destroyers, which I really like for... Ooh, that's interesting. Look at those volumes. Almost 3 times the volumes in the last couple of days. Price was just above 40 million ISK. Sellers are still at 43 million. That's interesting. Buyers are at 39.5 million. So we don't see this very often. Big volumes for 3 to 4 days and a price response, but definitely very muted. So what's the availability looking like? We get 78 here at 45 million, and the rest is not that much. So basically the gap is plugged very quickly, not too big in volumes. After that, we've got the Hecate. That one is going up in price. All right, selling for 67 million ISK. Buyers coming in at 52 million. Last 24 hours, yeah, that's 2 pages. That's gonna be probably more than 2 pages, driving the price down from 80 million to that 67 million range. So this is already starting to stall in its increased price, but this will normally also decrease the availability of confessors, so who knows, this price may slowly go back up. But then I'm really interested in the Jackdaw. Also a volume increase, went above 40 million ISK, 44 million for the sellers, 40 million for the buyers. And now, of course, I remember seeing what's actually happening here. It's a proving grounds. There is a tactical destroyer proving grounds happening at the moment. That is actually very interesting, because then I am interested in seeing what this Vapel is doing. Oh, that's nice. I'm not sure when it was, but a couple of weeks ago I said, if you want to take a gamble here on the upward pressure that we were seeing for the Confessor, for instance, made its way above 40, the Hecate was still commanding a nice premium. So that should have driven a lot of production, and then the Jackdaw was also slowly making its way up to 40 million ISK. If you wanted to take advantage of that, we had this Vapel that was still basically down to the 35 million range, and now it is selling for 64 million ISK. Now this was of course a gamble, CCP intervention that makes your profits. 42 million for the buyers, but this is due to those proving grounds, and so we have nice volumes. This Vapel, that's pretty damn expensive, 64 million. The king apparently is the Hecate, commanding 67 million ISK, and that went up to like 70 million pretty easily, no, even more, 80 million. Actually, so we basically ran out of Hecates. Of course, the close combat brawler, it's an amazing PvP ship. And then the Confessor is actually doing okay in volumes, but able to absorb this very impressively. So this could mean a little bit of volatility in the upcoming weeks for this this segment. What I also do think is that it's going to be interesting to see how production responds to this, and how quickly some of them will decrease in price, and if others can maintain their premium for a longer period of time. But this is very nice, a disruption in a market that I feel works very logically, and now we'll see how this bump is absorbed in the tactical destroyer market. And if you followed that lead there, where this Vapel below 35 million made a lot of sense to me because of what was happening in the others, you are of course looking at a nice payday at the moment. on the cruiser front. Here's the Legion, back up above 160 million. Okay, not bad. 166 for the sellers, 150 for the buyers. It's clearly a lack of availability that is currently driving the premium. If, like me, you bought close to 130, you can definitely try to make that trade. Loki went up to 200 million ISK here as well. Yeah, 195 for the sellers, 175 for the buyers. Again, I bought one for like 150, so definitely gonna be looking at a sale there, I think. And oh, is it? I kind of want to check. Is it availability? Yeah, lots of ones and twos. A little bit of plugging, of course, from 200 million, as that's a very nice high point. But down to 195, and availability is not that great. Proteus also going up, very interesting. 182 for the sellers, 154 for the buyers. And then Tengu, we already saw that from the ticker, making its way above 190 million for the sellers. Now here, I'm not sure, perhaps I missed it. Did CCP announce something that they were changing something to the Tech Tree cruisers? It is possible. What I will say then is that if that's not the case and the market is speculating on this, I still don't think that this is necessarily like a leak or anything like that, because this is something that I've thought about as well. During one of the live streams, I remember this very clearly. A couple of CCP devs basically confirmed that they do feel like the Tech Tree ship market, Tech Tree cruiser market, excuse me, has a bit of a problem, as a lot of their users had been encroached on by other ships, and that this was something that they were looking at. Now, at the time, of course, we were in the middle of the invasion, so no reason to think that that's short term, but to me that makes perfect sense. We then have the Phoenix Squadron, we've got the rebalance and the changes to the super carriers happening, so to me it's not that big of a leap to say I think that the tactical cruisers could be in the crosshairs and could be seeing changes sooner than we might expect. On top of that, I'm not 100% sure, but I really feel like CCP said during that live stream that perhaps they should look into giving the Tech Tree cruisers some new unique things, mechanics that they could use, and that's exactly what they did for the super carriers, of course, with the recloner that can bring pods back on the field of battle itself without having to go to the station over there. So I would say that this could be the market speculating on this being the next move for CCP. We may be wrong on that, and if you know that there's like an announcement, definitely put that in the comments. But this does seem to be a lot of increased interest all of a sudden in all of these Tech Tree cruisers, at least in the hull parts, and that has driven up the price quite considerably. If you followed me in that trade, in that gamble, I'm not gonna call that a trade, that was honestly a gamble. I bought a Loki at 150, I bought a Legion at 135. You can definitely turn that into a profit right now. And then for the extra product, I choose the Gecko. It's been a long time since we've taken a look at that one. So here we go, Gecko search coming in at 52 minutes. That's like that. So here is the Gecko chart. Gecko, a unique drone in EVE Online, also a unique item in EVE Online. Why? Because you can't just keep making more of them. So this is one of the few items where basically there is a limited supply of them. Now it's quite plentiful because CCP does give them out from time to time through like special events and things like that. But the general trend, and we can still see like the tail end of that here at the start of last year, is that they, as a result of that, see more destruction in production, and so they steadily tend to increase in price. You have the same situation, for instance, for tournament ships that are unique and you can't ever make more of them. Now here it's a bigger market, probably a more predictable market, and what I find very interesting on this one is that while last year we had this, and then you clearly have this big drop here in April, this big volume increase here in April. What is that? Of course, an event that actually dropped either geckos or blueprints for the geckos. So you had this big jump down, and then you need a little bit of time, of course, to fully absorb all of these volumes. But then you would perhaps expect, well, isn't that inflationary cycle going to start again? And the answer at the moment is no. Why? I think that this again confirms that story that I was trying to tell with PI. It is because the minerals are just grabbing all of that ISK at the moment that they are keeping anything else from inflating in price. And so here the Gecko very steady at around 100 million on the chart, 106 for the sellers, 92 million for the buyers. Availability, you can see it's okay, but it's definitely not great. I mean, you can buy a couple here and there for the ships if you want to. It's definitely decently available. But it's been in this range now for pretty much half a year, which is, I think, pretty unheard of for the Gecko market. Normally over this type of time period, you either have a crash because of new geckos coming in, or you have that increased price due to lower and lower and lower availability. And a lower willingness to sell them. So this is very interesting. I myself hold a couple of geckos kind of as a hedge against inflation, just like Plex. I think that these can serve that purpose, except of course when CCP comes in and re-inflates the number of gold bars, you could say the number of geckos in the game all of a sudden. That is what happens here. We have a little bit of a downwards crash here at the end as well, as we try to finally move up to the 120 range. We're right back down to the 100 million range. I think here it could be the market saying there's a lot of events coming and geckos could be part of the drop. Of the drops in those events, and so they're already saying let's not hold on to too many of these at the moment. So you have got this little volume bump here that drives the price back down. So to me this is very, very interesting as well. Of course we have special items like that in EVE Online, and the Gecko is kind of confirming that at the moment there is really no ISK left to inflate other stuff. Everything is going into the mineral market. Very, very cool. And yeah, we'll see of course how this evolves. Will CCP crash the price down lower by dropping more geckos in one of the events? It is possible. I personally don't think so. And if it doesn't happen, when will we see inflation start? Perhaps now, since we are also starting to see the first signs of increased prices for Plex as well. And there we go. That's going to be it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching. And as always, I'll see you next time.